of the redemptive story that you have for us. You're not surprised when we mess up. You know it all, and yet you still love us. We could be so far from you. We could be actively resisting you. We could be actually saying in our heart and soul right now, I want to have nothing to do with you. I don't want to be here. Rejecting you, and you still pursue us. You still love us. Your love for us is still there. You have this incredible redemptive story that accounts for every failure that we have. Father, I confess that at times I try to be good enough, and I'm sorry. I know that is probably a common theme, that we cannot be good enough. All we can do is get back up, keep fighting, keep trying, keep trusting that you're going to use every little thing, God, to paint this wonderful story of the redemptive process, the way that you've redeemed us and you will use our lives to redeem other people. Father, I pray that your Spirit would fill us fresh in a way that it has never before. I pray for these kiddos of VBS, God, that we would see a little bit of the battle that is going on for the souls of our children, for your plan of redeeming this city, and that it is used through the people here in this room, through everyone who calls himself Christian, everyone who wants to follow you, God, that you have purpose in everything that we are going through right now. Even though we don't understand and we don't know why, maybe it hurts, we trust that it is your plan, that you are good. Father, be with us. Help us to know the love that you have for us through Jesus. Amen.
Amen. You may be seated. Man, what we just sang is basically a lot of the sermon, right? When it says there's nothing that's been wasted, no failure or mistake, right? You're an artist, and I'm, and the potter, I'm the canvas and the clay, but a lot of times our faith can look really messy. It can look really dumb sometimes, like what we do is dumb, like our mistakes and our shortcomings, right? And that can be true, but yet God is bigger than our mistakes. It's kind of like there's a Facebook meme, maybe you've seen it, that like God's will is such that he's already taken account your stupidity in it, right? And that's very comforting for a guy like me, right? For someone who makes a lot of mistakes. But God is bigger than this. But yet sometimes in our real life, our faith is just kind of messy. And sometimes we can look at Bible characters and we can think, my goodness, they were just so awesome. And we can put up Abraham and Sarah, and we can just be like, oh my word, they're just on this pedestal. Look at how great they are, and look how awesome they are. And this song that we just sang is actually a lot more true about Abraham than Sarah, than putting them on this rosy pedestal of thinking that they were just always so faithful and always so good. They weren't. And that's comforting to us, right? Because we screw up and our faith is sometimes messy. But it's also a challenge because we want to see this and we want to say, man, I never want to be impatient with God's will. I never want to take matters into my own hands. I want to do it God's way. And I just want to do it God's way. And so that's where we're going to go this morning. It's this comfort of knowing Abraham and Sarah had a messy faith, but yet it's a challenge for us to grow in having faith in the real life. So that's the big idea. Grow in real life faith, right? Not just theoretical faith or just like the comforts of an air-conditioned building with soft chairs. It's pretty easy to hear these words, and yes, I have faith, but when you encounter real life situations and difficulties, it could be a little bit different. Anyways, we are in Hebrews chapter 11. We've been going through these list of names listed in what's sometimes called the Faith Hall of Fame. It's a bunch of names. It says, by faith, Abel offered a better sacrifice than than his brother Cain. Oh my goodness, my brain just turned off. And by faith, Noah built an ark. By faith, Abraham. By faith, Moses. And there's all this list. And we are in chapter 11, starting in verse 8. And this is about Abraham. And so it says, by faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to a place that he was to receive as an inheritance. And he went out not knowing where he was going. By faith, he went to live in the land of promise as in a foreign land, living in tents with Isaac and Jacob, heirs with him of the same promise. For he was looking forward to the city that has foundations, whose designer and builder is God. I'll pause right there for a second. Nick Hildebrandt actually preached this text, and it's awesome because the word there for builder is actually architect, and Nick Hildebrandt is an architect. So it just kind of happened that he did that. So he's already covered that, so I'm not really covering that. I just read it for context. But here's where we're picking up for this morning, verse 11. By faith, Sarah herself received power to conceive even when she was past the age, which is a nice way of saying she's really old. She's about 90 years old at this point, since she considered him faithful who had promised. Therefore, from one man, and him as good as dead, nice way of saying he's really old. He's about the age of death. He's 100 years old. And they were born descendants as many as innumerable grains of sand by the seashore. So if you read Hebrews 11, you get this very rosy picture of the story of Abraham and Sarah. In Bible interpreting land, scholarly, nerdy stuff, we call this an idealized version of the story. When they would idealize this, meaning it's like the most ideal components of the story is what I'm meaning, it's not like they're ignoring some of the ugly stuff or some of the other things. It's just more that the author is just really emphasizing as a literary note, here's what God is doing. Here's what I want you to see in this story, and that is the faith of Abraham. But if all you knew about Abraham and Sarah, which if that's true of you right now, is that's fine. If that's all you know is what I just read in Hebrews 11, that's not exactly how the story goes. It's a little bit more rough than that, actually. It's actually a lot more rough than this. But this is just more like the idealized version of the story. Now in verse 11, I have a footnote about this. I'm not going to get into it too much, but it's actually hard to interpret. And really, front and center is probably actually still Abraham. It says, by faith, Sarah herself. It's kind of a weird wording. But really, it probably should be, by faith implied Abraham, along with Sarah. So it's kind of pitting them both together, or not pitting them, but combining them together in this by faith. And it's about how they were able to produce a child in their old age. We'll just speak in code for a second here. And it's amazing. It worked, right? Even when he was 100 years old and she's 90. That's incredible. And so if some of you are thinking, I'm past the age of childbirth, hate to break it to you, nobody here is 90 yet. So so it's not, I said that at the nursing home and nobody laughed, They were like, no, that's not funny, Zach. That's not funny. But we can see here that God is bigger than age. God is bigger than biology. God is bigger than any of these things, and he is able to make this happen. But it is done through faith, right? I want to say that from the outset. It is done through faith. Abraham and Sarah have Isaac, their child, and it is through faith, right? And it took a long time to get there, but it is through faith. I just want to say that from the outset. But now we are going to go back to Genesis, and we're going to trace Abraham and Sarah's faith journey. And it's not anything spectacular. Anything but. It's very messy. So to start with, you can turn back to Genesis chapter 15, or it'll be on the screen. This is one of the major passages of the Bible that speaks of faith, salvation by faith. And the Apostle Paul quotes this a number of times. It's very important. But we see here this foundation of faith that God uses for salvation and to carry out his will. Okay? So this is Genesis 15. God's saying, I'm going to make you great. And Abraham's kind of complaining. He's like, yeah, but I don't have an heir. I'm 90 years old and I don't have an heir. And God's like, but you will have an heir. Verse 5. And he, that is God, brought him, that is Abraham, outside and said, look towards heaven, or look towards the sky, and number the stars. If you are able to number them, then he said to him, so shall your offspring be. And he believed the Lord, and God counted to him as righteousness, or rendered to him as righteousness, declared him justified. Right? And in the court of law, one who is justified is one who has been set free. And that's what Abraham is because of his faith. He is declared righteous. So this is awesome. This is great. Abraham believed. What an amazing thing that Abraham's such a man of faith and he believes. Well, we're not done. One major thing that is lacking in this verse, or in this chapter, is how they are going to have a child, or even with whom he's going to have a child. Right? And so God does not give them these details. And this happens so often in our lives, that whether we know it or not, God lays it upon somebody's heart that, I just don't feel like I'm supposed to be in this job right now. Or I just don't feel like I'm supposed to be here right now. Or I don't feel like I'm supposed to be doing this right now. And you just have the Lord lay that part on your heart. And it seems like God often gives his will in bits and pieces along the way. He rarely gives the whole shebang in one time, like a one-time thing where he tells us everything. It's like God does this on purpose because he's testing us, for one. And sometimes he doesn't want us to get too far ahead of him because we'll screw stuff up to get there. But here, God just says, you're going to have an offspring. Right? Eventually your offspring will have offspring, and offspring will be like the stars of heaven. Right? That's all Abraham knows at this point. Right? But that's all he knows, and sometimes that's all you know. You just know this little bit. I'm just not supposed to be here, I'm not supposed to be doing this, or I don't know what else. And so then, you are left with two major options. The first major option is to take matters into your own hands because you're impatient and you're just going to plow forward and do something different. Option 2, way more difficult. As Kara read during the service in Isaiah 40, strength will rise as we wait upon the Lord. Patience. Whew. I don't know about you. I don't like patience. I don't want to be patient. I don't know too many people who are like, man, I'm just a very patient person. But strength really will rise if we wait upon the Lord. So, let's see what Abraham and Sarah will do, shall we? If we go to the next chapter, Genesis 16, all they know is that they're going to have a descendant. And so here is Genesis 16, verses 1 through 2. Now Sarai, her name was Sarai before it was Sarah. Sarai, Abram, it was Abram before Abraham. We'll get to that here in a second. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children. She had a female Egyptian servant whose name was Hagar. And Sarai said to Abram, behold, now the Lord has prevented me from bearing children. Go into my servant, it may be that I should obtain children by her. And Abram listened to the voice of Sarai. Right? So remember, she's 90, she's in her late 80s at this point, he's in his late 90s at this point. All of us would think that's very unreasonable to think that this is time for us to start a family and to have kids. Right? So we don't want to look down upon them too much for this. But they just take matters into their own hands. They're impatient. They're not willing to consult with the Lord. They just say, let's do it this way. And they do. And so Abraham does take Hagar to be his wife. They have a child. His name is Ishmael. Now, anytime, I promise you, 100% of the time, without fail, right? Anytime you sense the Lord's calling or to do something, but you don't know what it is yet, and you act impatiently, you will make a mess of things. If you try to take matters into your own hands, you will make a mess of things. If you enter into polygamy, you will make a mess of things. And you add all of those things together, and you have this crazy drama, sitcom-like situation between Hagar and Sarai. Right? It's horrible. It's a horrible mess. It's a huge, horrible mess. And so, yes, they do bring forth Ishmael. Right? And so they have this child. Ishmael happens to be the people that the Muslims come from. They trace their ancestry back to Abraham through Ishmael. That's a whole other sermon. But nonetheless, they make this big mess of things because they took matters into their own hands and they were impatient and also polygamous. I'm not really worried about that here. But all three of those things, great big mess. And so, God has to do what he always has to do when humans do stuff. He's got to fix their mistakes. He's got to clean up the mess. And so we jump to Genesis 17, verse 15 through 21. And God said to Abraham, "As for Sarai, your wife, she shall not call her Sarai, but Sarah shall be her name," which means princess, by the way. "I will bless her, and moreover, I will give you a son by her. I will bless her, and she shall become nations. Kings of people shall come from her." Then Abraham fell on his face and laughed and said to himself, "Shall a child be born to a man who is 100 years old? Shall Sarah, who is 90 years old, bear a child?" So not only do they make a mess of things, and, they're impatient, they take matters into their own hands, they make a big mess of stuff, now they are laughing at the creator of the universe for his plan. They are laughing at God for this crazy thought of them having a child. Right? I should also point out in the very next chapter, the Lord appears to Abraham again and reiterates what he says. Sarah overhears it, and she laughs. She's laughing at God also for this plan. Again, she's 90. That's not normal for somebody who's 90 to have a child. We get it. But they are also laughing at God. It gets better. Back in chapter 17, verse 19. God said, "No, but," verse 18. "And Abraham said to God, 'Oh, that Ishmael might walk before you.'" So now they're laughing at God and they're saying, "Look what we did. We got Ishmael. This plan will work. We're really content with Ishmael being the descendant that you're talking about. That's fine with us. Right? You should just be okay with this, God." And so now they're telling God how it should go down. I don't know if you've ever tried to tell God how he should do things. I don't know if you've ever been like in a position of a boss or manager and somebody tried to tell you how things should be ran. You probably don't like that too well. I don't think God likes it too well either. Now we get to verse 19. God said, "No, but Sarah, your wife, shall bear a son, and you shall call his name Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant for his offspring after him. As for Ishmael, I have heard you. Behold, I have blessed him, and I will make him a fruitful and multiply him greatly. He shall father 12 princes, and I will make him into a great nation. But I will establish my covenant with Isaac, and Sarah shall bear to you at this time next year." And so, that's how the great divide between the Muslims and Israel and the Christian world, that we believe that the covenant goes through Isaac and not through Ishmael. Again, that's a whole other sermon. That's not really the big point right now. Other than salvation does come through the line of Abraham to Isaac, and then Isaac and on the rest. But this is God's plan. That really is playing into this. This is God's plan. We may wonder, why in the world didn't God just allow Isaac to be born to Sarah when she was 28? When that's a good time to have a child. or sometime, younger than that, in your early 20s. That would be a great time to have a child. Why in your 90? Like, why did God do that? I believe God does this because he wants to make a huge spectacle of this birth, because it's a very special birth, right? If it was just born to just some ordinary couple, like whoop-de-doo, but like this is noteworthy. Wait, in your 90s, you have this child, right? That's not normal. That's crazy. And it's because through Isaac would come Jacob. Through Jacob would be the 12 sons, which becomes the 12 tribes of Israel. And then through Judah, one of those 12 tribes, comes the Christ. That's why it's a big deal that God waited until she was 90 to have this notable birth. And it's very much why it can't be done through the schemes of man. Right? The Christ is not going to come through the schemes of man. That's what Abraham and Sarah were trying to do. This is only going to come through the will of God, and that is going to be done his way, not man's way. And that's why God says, no, it is not Ishmael. This is not to say God doesn't love Ishmael and doesn't invite him into salvation. I'm not saying that at all. It's just that God is saying, no, my covenant is going to be done through Isaac and Jacob. As imperfect as Isaac and Jacob were, and the 12 tribes of Israel, including Judah, by the way. He's one of the worst ones. And yet it's through him that the Christ would come. That's why it is very important that Abraham and Sarah do it God's way. They did not have their eyes open to how big of thing they were a part of. They could only see them. I'm going to have a descendant. That's good enough for me. Ishmael, he's fine. That's great. And God's like, no, that's your will. Let me do my will. It will have eternal significance. And there's so often that we can have the same thing happen. We'll just like, well, it's not that big of a deal, God. We'll just do it this way. And God's like, no, what I am doing is connected to that ultimate seed of Abraham, which is Jesus. It's connected to this. Never think that what God calls you to do is something insignificant. Never assume that what God is calling you to do is somehow separate from Jesus and the coming seed. It's always connected, and God redeeming this world and making all things new. And so never think that this is just some simple thing. Right? We're always a part of something bigger, way bigger than what we can see with our physical eyes. But there is some redemption to this story. I'm not going to read it, but in chapter 21, Isaac is born, right? And I believe that this is born through faith. It's kind of like you remember when Jesus goes to his hometown, Nazareth, and he's unable to do any mighty works there because a prophet is honored except for in his hometown. They lacked faith in him. They disregarded him. They wanted to kick him to the curb. And so God shows us that he operates through faith. He doesn't have to. That's just what he chooses to do. He operates through faith. And so the author of Hebrews knows this. He believes this. And he looks back at the story, and he's analyzing it and saying, well, Isaac was born. So Abraham and Sarah must have had this heart change and grew in having this faith, and that's what brought forth Isaac. Right? And I believe in that very last part of chapter 17, that I read in verse 21, it says, but I will establish my covenant with Isaac, whom Sarah shall bear to you at this time next year. A lot of you have had children, right? How long is a pregnancy? 9 months. What does he give them? A year. So he's saying a year from now you're going to have this child, and that's when I'm going to come back and visit you. And so I believe that God is very gracious and merciful and granting them this 3-month period of surrendering their control, getting their laughter under control over God's will, and coming to grips with buying into what God's doing. I don't know if you've ever had to surrender control in a situation. Sometimes it takes a heck of a lot longer than 3 months. But that's what I'm spotting you 3 months. That's what you get. And so in that amount of time, I believe God is saying, you need to come to grips with what I'm doing. And I believe the author, the reason why he speaks so highly of Abraham and Sarah, excuse me. He does Isaac, that's next week's sermon. But he speaks so highly of them because he believes they must have come to that faith that led forth to Isaac. And this is furthered even more in chapter 22 in the scene where Abraham offers Isaac up as a sacrifice. He doesn't actually do that. God was testing him to call him to do that. But Abraham in that story does not waver at all. He does not try to find a loophole. He doesn't try to find some way out of this. He just goes and does it in ultimate, amazing faith. Right? And God solidifies Abraham as this man who would be, the covenant would come through to Isaac because of faith. And so there's this redemptive components to the story that is very, very comforting, that God would be this gracious and merciful. But this story, I believe, is so helpful and relatable because our faith can be messy sometimes. I don't know if you've ever been impatient before. I've been impatient with God. I don't know if you've ever tried to take matters into your own hands when you had no business doing it. I've done that. Or we can throw in, sometimes we just ignore God. Sometimes we just, there's just so many other variables that we just get so consumed with life, consumed with worldliness, that we just don't hear God. Right? There's all sorts of variables that can make our faith messy. But in some way, shape, or form, even though you're probably not entering into polygamy, you can resonate with the messiness of faith here. Because that's what real life is. It's not just this comfortable, air-conditioned church building with padded chairs that we need to have faith. It's out when you are struggling with real-life situations, real-life circumstances, real-life hardships. That's when you need to have this faith. But there's so many times when God, I believe, gives us this first installment of His will, but not the whole picture. I remember discipling this man. This is clear back in my South Dakota days. His name was Jesse. Unfortunately, he's passed away from cancer a few years ago. But I remember sitting with him, and he had just become a Christian not that long ago. And he's like, I just don't feel like I'm supposed to be at this job. I'm not supposed to be here. Like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I just don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. And he's frantic. He's got a wife and 2 kids, and he's just like, I don't know what to do. It's driving me nuts. He was very impatient, but he did not act out of that impatience, right? So he just stayed put for like a year. He was like in this frantic, like, I just don't know why I'm here. I'm supposed to be somewhere else, and just stayed put for a whole year. All of a sudden, this door just opened for him in Minneapolis. He got into this job that he wanted. He got the kids into this Christian school that he wanted to get into. And everything just was like boom, 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 boom. And it's like, when this happens, man, you got to hang on. Because if you endure the struggle of patience, eventually God, typically, I'm not putting God in a box, but typically what happens, God hits the green button for go, and it's just like whoosh, and this whirlwind of stuff just happens, and you got to hang on for dear life. But that's what happens when we act in patience. That's what happens when you do things according to God's will. But other times we can be stubborn. We can just, we want to do it our way. Perhaps you've been in a relationship where you knew you weren't supposed to be in this particular relationship, right? And maybe like it wasn't even a bad relationship. It's just you felt God saying you aren't supposed to be in that relationship, right? That happened to me. And I ignored God as hard as I could, and I regret it, right? And you can have situations like that where like I'm just ignoring God. I don't want to deal with what you're saying. Right? I don't want to do it, and I definitely don't want to do it your way. But I promise you, 100% of the time, if you are acting out of impatience, you will make a mess of things. If you are ignoring God, you will make a mess of things. If you try to do things your own way, you will make a mess of things. And I'll just say it. If you enter into polygamy, you'll enter a mess of things. Right? It's never good. None of those things are ever good, brothers and sisters. As much as you want it to be that way, as much as you don't want to do it God's way, as much as you perhaps laugh at God's way like Abraham and Sarah does, I promise you, 100% of the time, you will make a mess of things if you do it your way. It may be hard and unpleasant, but it will be the right thing and the good thing if you do it the Lord's way. As we sang, right? You make all things work together for my future and for my good. You make all things work together for your glory and for your name. Right? That's Romans 8:28 or Genesis 50, whichever one you want to include in there. But that's what God does. His ways are higher than our ways. His thoughts are higher than our ways. Right? We should not lean on our own understandings, but we should trust in the Lord with all of our heart. When we do it that way, God will lead us, and it will be to the good of what God is doing. But perhaps you're sitting here in conviction because you know you have taken matters into your own hands. You know you've been impatient. Perhaps you're doing that right now. Right? Perhaps you're in a season of doing that right now. But I want you to see this redemption in the story. That Abraham and Sarah were making a complete mess of things. But God factors into his will our stupidity. Praise be to God. And yet, through the imperfect faith of Abraham and Sarah, through the messiness of that, comes Isaac, and then Jacob, and then the tribe of Judah, which comes through Christ. The salvation of all. God is able to do that through the messiness of the faith of Abraham and Sarah. That's what we are to see from the grand narrative of the Bible. Human beings screw all sorts of stuff up. But yet God is faithful to bring forth salvation. God is faithful to bring forth redemption. And so if you're here struggling with anything, let me just push you towards Jesus and say, don't waver in faith in Jesus. Don't try to make your own path, like Abraham and Sarah trying to make their own path of salvation. It's not going to work. The covenant's not through Ishmael. The covenant's only through Isaac to Jesus, right? Don't try to make a different religious path to heaven. Don't try to make a different road to heaven of any sort, right? Fall only in Jesus. God allowed a 90-year-old woman to bear a son in order for Jesus to get here. That's how important this line is and how important it is to believe in this Jesus and to have faith in him. So believe in him. Do not waver in faith in him. Put your full stock in him, in this Jesus, and follow him all of your days. We don't want to have just this theoretical faith or this faith in a comfortable incubator of a church building. We want faith that will actually meet the real life. And so let us grow in having faith in real life. Lord God, I pray that you would bless us now with this incredible faith that if you can make a 90-year-old woman have birth, there's nothing you can't do. So please give us that faith fully to trust in you all the time. Not just right now, but like Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday and 10 years from now and 50 years from now, would we still be living in this unshakable faith, knowing that you are the God of the universe and can do anything. And also, please forgive us for the times that we do waver like Sarah and Abraham did. Forgive us for the times when we are impatient. Forgive us for the times when we act in our own strength and we do things our own way and we make a mess of stuff. But as we're about to sing, your love never fails. It never gives up. It never gives up on me. Just as your love did not give up on Abraham and Sarah, but brought forth this redemptive part to the story where Isaac was born, would you lead us to that redemptive components where we are led to faithfulness? And so lead us now as we sing as unto you. In Jesus' name, amen.